It is 3 in the morning and your apartment is dark except for the thin blue line under the door of the room where the computer is, and from inside that room comes a sound you have started to find more comforting than any human voice. The soft, patient, mechanical sound of work being done by something that is not you, while you sleep. You wake up as you have started to wake up most nights, not from a nightmare but from a kind of disbelief. You walk to the room in your socks. You look at the screen. You have made $1,400 since you fell asleep, and you did not lift a finger, and that is either the best thing that has ever happened to you or the beginning of the end of you, and for a long time you will not be able to tell which. 2 years earlier, you were not a person who slept well. You were 24, and you were doing the kind of work that the internet politely calls freelance and that your bank account more accurately called intermittent. You wrote things for people. Descriptions, emails, the small invisible text that businesses need and do not want to write themselves. You were good at it, and you were slow at it, which is the worst possible combination, because being good meant people kept hiring you, and being slow meant you could never take enough of them to climb out of the hole. You worked 12-hour days for the income of a part-time job. You had begun to suspect that effort and reward had been quietly disconnected somewhere above your pay grade, and that nobody was going to reconnect them for you. You found the tool the way everyone found it. Late, skeptical, and slightly annoyed that people would not stop talking about it. You typed in a request you were sure it would fail. It did not fail. It did in 9 seconds, a competent version of a thing that would have taken you 40 minutes, and you sat back in your chair with the specific discomfort of a man who has just watched a machine do, badly but instantly, the thing he does, slowly but well. You did not feel excited. You felt, if you are honest, a little sick. Because you understood immediately that the ground had moved and that you had 2 choices, and that the first choice was to stand still and be buried, and the second was to learn to ride the thing that had just moved the ground. You chose to ride it. The first thing you learned is that the machine is not a worker. It is a lever. And a lever is worthless on its own and devastating in the hands of someone who knows exactly where to put it. The people losing their minds with fear were the ones who thought the machine was going to do their thinking. The tiny number of people quietly getting rich were the ones who had figured out that the machine would do everything except the thinking, and that this made the thinking the only thing worth being paid for. So you stopped selling the writing. You started selling the result. You took a client who needed 200 product descriptions, a job that would have eaten a month of your life, and you delivered it in a day and a half, and you charged for the month, and the client was thrilled, and you walked away with $900 and a feeling you had never had before, which was the feeling of your time and your income coming unstuck from each other. You learned to build little machines inside the machine. You learned to write the instructions so precisely that the same task could be done 1,000 times without you in the loop. You learned to chain the tools together, one to research, one to draft, one to check the first one's work, one to format the result and send it where it needed to go, so that a thing which used to require a person now required only a trigger. By the end of the first year, you had built what you could only describe as a staff of nobody, a company of one human being, and a quiet, tireless, uncomplaining workforce that did not sleep, did not quit, did not ask for a raise, and did not, on its worst day, do worse work than you had done on your average 1-2 years before. And the money became real, in a way that frightened you. Your first 5-figure month was $11,000, and you read the number 4 times, and then you turned off the screen and walked around the block because you did not know what else to do with your body. Within 6 months, it was $40,000 in a single month, from a one-person agency that existed mostly as a set of instructions and a domain name. You raised your rates and lost no one. You took on more clients and hired no one. You crossed $300,000 in a year at an age when most of the people you had gone to school with were negotiating for an extra week of vacation. You bought the apartment with the room, with the blue light. You should have been, by every measure you had ever been taught, free. The hollowness did not announce itself. It arrived the way water arrives in a basement, not all at once, but discovered one day, already there. You noticed it first when a client asked you a question about the work. A real question, a craft question, the kind you used to be able to answer in your sleep, and you realized you did not know the answer anymore, because you had not actually done the work in 14 months. You had managed the doing of it. You had supervised a machine that had once supervised you, and somewhere in the handoff, the thing you had been proud of, The slow, stubborn, hard-won skill that had made you good before it had made you rich had quietly atrophied, the way a muscle atrophies in a cast, and you had not noticed because the cast had been made of money. You started to feel like a man holding the leash of a very large dog that was walking him. The income was extraordinary and the work was effortless, and you were, for the first time in your life, profoundly bored in a way that money could not touch. Because the boredom was not about the money. It was about the fact that you had built a machine to remove all the friction from your work, and it had worked perfectly, and you had not understood until it was gone that the friction had been the part that was yours. The struggle had not been the obstacle to the meaning. The struggle had been the meaning. You had paid a machine to take it, and it had. And now you sat in a quiet apartment at 3 in the morning with $1,400 new and no idea what you were for. You did the thing that the panicking and the lazy never do, which is the only thing that ever actually works. You stopped, and you asked a better question. Not how do I make more, but what is this actually good for? And sitting with that question, you came to understand the shape of the mistake. You had been using the most powerful lever ever built to do more of the work that bored you, faster. You had pointed infinite leverage at the smallest possible target. The machine was not the problem. Where you had aimed it was the problem. You had aimed it at escape when you could have aimed it at the one thing you had always wanted to build and had never had the time, the energy, or the nerve to attempt. So you turned the machine around. You let it keep running the agency in the background, the boring engine that paid for everything. But you stopped pouring yourself into managing it, and you started pouring yourself into a thing of your own. The idea you had carried for years and never executed because the execution would have taken a team you could not afford and a decade you did not have. Now you had a team that cost you nothing and a decade you could compress into a season. You used the machine the way it was actually meant to be used. Not as the thing that did the work instead of you, but as the thing that did everything around the work so that you could finally do the part that was only yours. The taste. The judgment. The decision about what was worth making at all. The 1,000 small human choices that the machine, for all its terrifying speed, could imitate but never originate, because it could draft anything and decide nothing. And you got good again. Differently good. You were not the slow, careful craftsman of 24 anymore, hand-making 200 descriptions. You were something the world did not have a clean word for yet, a person who could hold an idea in his head and conduct an orchestra of machines to build it, while keeping his own hands on the one instrument that mattered, which was the question of why. The friction came back, but it came back in the right place. It was no longer the friction of typing the 400th sentence. It was the friction of deciding which of 1,000 possible things deserved to exist, and that friction did not bore you. That friction was the most alive you had felt in years. It is 3 in the morning again, and your apartment is dark again except for the thin blue line under the door, and from inside the room comes the same soft, mechanical sound of work being done by something that is not you. But this time you are not asleep. This time you are in the room, awake, at the screen, not watching the machine make you money while you rest, but working alongside it on the one thing you decided was worth building. The machine carrying everything it can carry, and you carrying the only thing it cannot. The money still comes in while you sleep. That stopped being the point a while ago. You did not make the machine work for you so that you would never have to work again. You made the machine work for you so that, for the first time in your life, all of your work could finally be the part that was actually yours. The lesson, if you want it stated plainly, is the one nobody selling you the dream will say out loud. The machine will gladly take all of your work, and if you let it, it will take the part that made the work worth doing and hand you money in exchange. And you will not notice the trade until you are rich and empty at 3 in the morning. The winners are not the ones who handed everything. The winners are the ones who keep the one human thing, the taste, the judgment, the why, and let the machine carry the rest. You did not become free when the machine started doing your work. You became free the day you understood which part of the work you were never supposed to give away.